In today's video, we're taking a look at the latest NHL Trade Talk heading into the NHL Trade Deadline on April the 12th. We're looking at teams like the Winnipeg Jets, the New York Islanders, Boston Bruins, Anaheim Ducks, and Florida Panthers. We also have some more news from the NHL waiver wire and an update on the Canucks situation that they're dealing with off the ice as well. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. Before we jump into today's videos, I want to acknowledge our sponsor, Manscaped. They were great and hooked me up with lots of great free products, which I'm happy to endorse here. And they have an exclusive offer for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers. By using promo code TSH at manscaped.com, you can get 20% off and free shipping. So that's free shipping and 20% off at manscaped.com. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we have a variety of news. Let's start here with an update on the situation with the Vancouver Canucks. The situation in Vancouver with all the positive COVID tests has taken yet another turn for the worse. More updates today now indicate that including coaches and players, were I think around 20 or 21 people impacted, with many others that could be impacted, including players' families, and it's really spreading like wildfire here. I mean, obviously the whole team pretty much, you can say, is impacted. The breakdown from what we're hearing is around 18 players and 3 members of the staff that are currently impacted here. Now, there's different degrees of reports out there. I've seen reports from Darren Dreger talking about what his sources were saying. Some of the local Vancouver media have slightly different information as far as just how bad some of the symptoms are and all that. But you know what? It really doesn't matter too much. There's not a huge separation between the reports. At the end of the day here, a lot of people are impacted. This is arguably the worst situation dealing with COVID in the NHL for sure. Likely in pro sports, since they've all tried to make their comeback since all this started happening last spring. And it's just really not a good situation. I think at this point, it's fair to say that there's a real possibility that the Vancouver Canucks season very well could be over. If you think about the number of people and players that are impacted here, how long they're going to take to recover, how long some of them are going to have to isolate from each other so it doesn't spread further, and all the different protocols in place. You know, it's realistic to think it's going to be well over 2 weeks, at least I think, in my own opinion, before they return. I mean, they originally targeted an April 6th date for practice with an April 8th game. That's not happening. That's fair to say. We don't really have any further updates on dates beyond that right now because it's just really difficult to say. But based on the fact that more of the players are having more severe symptoms. Now, there's, like I said, there's different reports out there. Some of them are saying that there's only 1 or 2 with, somewhat severe, mild symptoms. Some of them are saying that it's mostly mild. It doesn't matter. The fact is that some of them are having severe symptoms is really not good, and it's spreading to families, and a lot of people at risk here. So let's just keep them all in our thoughts. Hopefully they can get back from this. Hopefully they can play at least part of their schedule to finish out the season. But unfortunately, we have to understand here that there's a real chance the Canucks may not play again until next year. Now, it was also mentioned here by Elliot Friedman on Saturday Headlines that there's a real possibility the NHL could be considering at least having a backup plan as another bubble on tap here for the NHL playoffs because of the situation happening in Vancouver. And, obviously they don't want any more COVID situations to pop up that really impact the playoffs being, not being completed. So there is a real chance here that even though the NHL or the players don't really want it, none of them are crazy about doing it again, but the fact is that they need to have plans A, B, and C on the table here to try to complete this season as safely as possible, and that even though it's not a popular decision, they do need to consider that. And Friedman says that they're expected to at least have some plans laid out in case they need to go down that road. I mean, they could probably put up a bubble in Canada for the North Division playoffs, or maybe do multiple bubbles for different divisions and then condense it down afterwards. I don't know exactly what they would consider, but considering that these teams have only been playing each other, all season, that would make sense if they could do it and have one bubble per division. But I know that a lot of these teams are really hoping to have more of their own fans in attendance, have all their games in their own buildings, be able to generate some revenue, obviously. So there's going to be a lot of pushback against it if it's at all possible or safe to do so. But we're a little bit early yet, but it makes sense that they'd be having some contingency plans in the back burner in case things get a lot worse before they get better. And we also have some news on the NHL waiver wire today. Of course, yesterday, I believe I mentioned that there wasn't additional players on waivers. I was actually wrong. Just wanted to correct a mistake of mine. There was a guy on waivers that I completely missed, and that's Joakim Nygard of the Edmonton Oilers. So Nygard ends up clearing. He's still with the organization, and that is all said and done here. But we have two new guys on waivers today. That's Luke Johnson of the Minnesota Wild, and then of course Jacob De La Rose as well. Both players will have until noon Eastern time to clear. I mean, Johnson's case, he was through waivers already once before. He's played his 10 games. It's either 10 games or 30 days, whatever comes first. Then they have to go through waivers again. So unfortunately for him, he has to go through this process, but I think it's probably unlikely he gets claimed. He hasn't really put up anything offensively speaking, but he's getting a chance to play in Minnesota. I think he'll probably clear. Same likely goes for De La Rose, but we'll have to see at noon Eastern time here tomorrow. Now on to today's NHL Trade Rumours. Obviously, there's still a lot of players that are likely going to move here. That has been a little bit quiet on the rumor front a little bit here, but we do have some more news on Kyle Palmieri of the New Jersey Devils. He could very well have played his last game in a Devils uniform. He's being held out of today's action for precautionary reasons because they are anticipating a trade. So all the reports that we've been seeing and reporting on here ourselves saying that, you know, they're not looking good on a contract extension. It obviously seems to be legit. Even Palmieri's agent, Bartlett Hockey, has put out some information on Twitter indicating that those reports are indeed true. Palmieri was held out for precautionary purposes and that he's expecting a trade in the coming days or week before the NHL deadline. So could it happen very quickly? It's possible, but it could drag on right up until the 11th hour here. It's really difficult to say, but as far as what teams are in play, it's believed that the Islanders and the Bruins are kind of like the most interested and having the most conversations, but by no means does it mean that they're limited to those two teams. I know there were early reports suggesting that the Canadian clubs were unlikely to be involved, but now there's some degree of skepticism that they could be even having conversations as well. I would suspect a team mostly like the Maple Leafs are the most likely to add it to forward group to do that. So they very well could be in the mix there as well. To a degree, maybe Edmonton, although, you know, all those teams are going to have a bit of a, you know, difficult time doing so. But it was believed that Edmonton might want something a little different, more so for their bottom six or more for like a third line center type of role. So, you know, they could be in on Palmieri, but less likely, but we'll see. There's other U.S. teams as well, including a team like the Avalanche, for example. They've been rumored to want to add before the deadline too. So there's lots of interest in this player. He's a guy that works hard, can score goals. You know, has been around the league a long time. He's a rental, so the cost shouldn't be too astronomically high. Like I said before, the Islanders were believed to be a front runner for a variety of reasons. One, because of the familiarity with Lou Lamoriello and a player. The fact that for him as a player, it's probably preferable because he wouldn't have to go very far. Obviously, New Jersey and Long Island, not that far apart. So from a family perspective, it would be a little bit easier to manage. So that might be something he prefers. Like I said, and obviously a team like the Bruins, not too far away either. They've been looking to add a top six, middle six type of winger, and he would certainly really add to that secondary scoring. It could be a great fit there. So those are the main teams that are involved in Palmieri's trade talks that we know of right now, but there's always a couple of teams that kind of come in last minute or kind of flew under the radar that weren't catching many NHL insiders, attention. So we'll have to see how talks go. But the fact that he'll be traded now is just ramped up way up, and it's very, very likely just about any time now. He could have played his last game in a Devils uniform. Now, sticking with a team like Boston, who would have interest in Palmieri, there are reports that they're looking at a variety of other players. Bruins are not able to get in on a guy like Palmieri. Another player of interest that's been in the rumor mill could be Rickard Rakell. Now, the only difference here with Rakell, obviously, he has term on his contract. He has another year, although it's a pretty reasonable contract. They wouldn't have to move out a whole lot to kind of make things work. So there's that perspective. He could also add a good secondary scoring punch. We've seen Boston and Anaheim make deals here in the last couple of years as well. So there is some familiarity amongst the GMs doing business together. So there is that. And of course, when it comes to Rakell, though, because of that term, the price is going to be a little bit higher. I'm not sure exactly what Anaheim is going to be asking for Rakell, but it was believed before they're going to be wanting multiple assets, and they might want more of a roster player now as well as something for the future. So they probably are going to be asking for a guy like Jake DeBrusk. Now, whether a guy like DeBrusk is moved, it remains to be seen. I would said before that adding a second line winger and subtracting a guy who can be a second line winger, to me, doesn't make a ton of sense because you're not really getting stronger, in my opinion. They need to find a way, for the playoffs, to be able to add and not take away too much of the now. I understand what teams want, but at the end of the day here, they might have some other assets that they could be better served to move if they can. But it really boils down to what their trading partner is looking for. And a deal for Raquel might not work out. They might have to go down the road of finding another player like Paul Mary, who's a rental. A guy like Bobby Ryan in Detroit comes to mind as a possibility. He may not have the same pedigree at his current age as those other two guys, but he's had some great moments this year with the Red Wings, and he certainly has been a great playoff performer. You look back to that 2017 run with Ottawa, he certainly performed especially well against the Bruins. So certainly somebody else they could consider on the rental market, but Boston might not have any choice to go that route. It just really boils down to what the asking prices are. But when it comes to players with term ahead of this deadline, I don't think GMs are going to be real easy to drop their price and move on from them because a lot of teams are just going to have a ton of options with the cap space. Rentals are going to be a lot easier to facilitate without doing more of a hockey trade where it's something off each roster going each way to kind of shake things up. So we'll have to see what happens. But Bruins and Don Sweeney are apparently in the mix there. They could also look to add to their blue line. But there's been less talk about that recently and haven't been linked to too many guys. I know one guy that did come up that I've seen in the rumor mill about Boston on the left side of their defense was Mike Riley in Ottawa. Certainly a guy who could be a good third pair guy. He's a great skater, good at breaking the puck out. Not the greatest defensively, but if you put him with the right guy, now that he's been playing with Artem Zub in Ottawa for the last number of games, he's been much better. He's been more stabilized. At one point, he was playing more with a guy like Eric Gudbranson, and that just wasn't working because he just wasn't able to gel with him, and Branson was just causing too many risks that Riley just could not cover. So we'll see what happens in Boston, but there's lots of talk going on that they're looking to make some additions here before the playoffs. Now, of course, the Winnipeg Jets are another team looking to add on the blue line. They were already rumored to be adding to the blue line. It's been something that's been a narrative discussed all season long, and as the season went along and the fact that they were doing really well just certainly ramped up the likelihood that it was going to happen. But now they've gone and lost defenseman Nathan Beaulieu, who actually is gone for the season due to a major shoulder injury. It's a torn labrum. He's going to be out for several months, so he is done for the year. Had no chance of coming back in the playoffs, so that blue line has been depleted even further. So we'll have to see what happens in that regard, but obviously Winnipeg has been linked to some rental defensemen like David Savard in Columbus has been a name that's come up. They've also been rumored to be looking at some of the guys in Nashville who might not be on the market anymore, like Ekholm and Ellis were big-time players that were really near the top of the trade bait boards. And the Winnipeg Jets seem to be a prime contender to make a deal for one of them. But now, with Nashville back in the playoff mix, it seems less likely that Nashville will feel the need to do that. Both these guys are under contract for more than just the current season. Of course, Ekholm has one more year. Ellis has a few more. So, it's pretty likely that those guys may not be available. They might have to go the rental route here. So Savard's one name that has certainly come up here as a good connection, can play the right side, but certainly the left side of their blue line might be the preferable way for them to go here. It just really boils down to what is available out there. But another name that comes up, again, takes us back to Anaheim, and that's right shot defenseman Josh Manson. Now, Manson's had his fair share of injuries this year and has missed a fair bit of time, but he's certainly another player that many feel could benefit from a change of scenery. And many NHL insiders have reported on throughout the season that they felt it was a good chance that the Ducks might be able to move one of their defensemen to shake things up on the blue line. They have more than enough guys under contract there, and they could try to get some other future assets here to help for the future. And obviously Manson's a guy who could come into Winnipeg and take on an immediate top four role, really solidify things that he can get back to playing the way that he's capable of here in the past. It could be a real force for them. And he's a guy that still has some term on his contract and could, like I said, really help balance things out back there. So another guy they could target outside of Savard, who would just be a pure rental. I mean, when it comes to Savard, like I mentioned before, another team that's going to be in the mix on him and might stand a better chance is the Florida Panthers. Of course, Bill Zito, the GM there, very familiar with Savard from his time in Columbus. If they prefer the familiarity, and maybe the options for quarantining might be different there as well. So it might be something that might be more preferable for the player. It's difficult to say, but the Jets certainly need more help on the blue line than they have before, and it's bound to happen here at some point that they target somebody. Just a matter of how high end they're able to accomplish here before the deadline kicks in. Now, another interesting tidbit I saw in the New York Post from Larry Brooks, wondering about the Florida Panthers' ability to kind of do their best to replace Aaron Ekblad. Now, we can all likely agree that the way Ekblad was playing this year, he would have been at least in the conversation for the Norris Trophy. I don't think he would have won, but he certainly would have been top 5 or 6 for voting. Arguably one of the best seasons of his career so far. It's an unfortunate shame for him that he had to go down the way he did, and things ended that way, and he's going to be out for several weeks here. He's going to be well into the offseason before he's ready to go and start skating again. So obviously him coming back is not really an option, but he wonders in his latest article here that there is a right shot defenseman sitting at home waiting for an opportunity, and even though he comes with, a bit of a baggage, would they be possibly interested in talking to the Rangers about Tony DeAngelo? I mean, yes, he comes, like I said, with some baggage. There's some issues, obviously, that he ran into this year. He has a history of these types of incidents, but they need somebody for the right side. He could certainly fulfill close to what the offensive requirements that Ekblad was doing. So, from a puck moving standpoint, just on ice performance, he would probably be good. But you have to question the fact that DeAngelo has another season on his contract. So that might not be great for them cap-wise financially beyond the current year. And then, of course, there's all the drama and baggage that they'd have to deal with, fitting him into their locker room. It's hard to say. So as much as he's a primed right shot guy who could probably come close to fulfilling the offensive production, I just don't know if you take the chance and do that, but they do need to do something. It was a big blow to their team. They're having a great year. It'd be a shame to see them, blow a playoff opportunity because of their top defenseman being out. So we'll see what they do. I don't think they're going to go after Tony DeAngelo, though. Do you see any chance of a team picking up DeAngelo before the deadline? I think it's more likely that it doesn't happen and that DeAngelo gets bought out by the Rangers, becomes a free agent. And even then, it's difficult to say if his next opportunity comes right away. Does he have to go to Europe, KHL? I don't know what happens next for DeAngelo, but right now it looks like nobody in the NHL really has any interest, even though the guy is very talented on the ice, offensively speaking. So let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comment section, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.